Oh, shift! You're listening to the O Shift podcast.
This is not just another category of tool that's being plugged in. This is shifting the mindsets that you're hiring for, the culture you want on teams. What Gen AI can do today, we are 3 to 5 years from being able to actually have that in place.
So you don't know what's going to happen tomorrow, but you know it can't be like today.
The safest place to be is on the forefront of this change.
Welcome to the O Shift podcast, where AI meets SaaS. I'm Rick Watson, and in this series, my guest is Jason Cottrell, CEO of Orium, a system integrator and services firm working across modern commerce and digital platforms. Jason's been leading through two major industry pivots. I mean, obviously, from waterfall to agile, long ago that none of us remember anymore, the growth of SaaS, and now the warp speed shift to AI and agents. Jason, despite being like one of the most prolific posters, a CEO, is also the incoming president of the Mach Alliance. So, first of all, congrats, Jason.
Thanks, Rick. It's amazing because with that mandate, it's also so squarely overlapped with where Orium is going. It's incredible alignment, and very, very excited and honored by kind of the membership's confidence in myself and the incoming board to take on that challenge.
No, I mean, that we're excited about that. Hopefully we can bend your ear a little bit at the end of the show about that.
For sure.
You've lived a number of different transitions. And as we talked about it before the show, you even reminded me of waterfall to agile. I remember that as well earlier in my career. You're saying the AI shift feels just as fundamental.
I think so. I mean, this is not just another category of tool that's being plugged in. This is shifting, the mindsets that you're hiring for, the culture you want on teams, how you manage and support that, the tool chain that wraps up, that comes around it, entire components of kind of the infrastructure in most businesses. I think, I draw a lot of parallel. Like this is a true change. And if anything, the change management component of this, I think, is tougher than the technology. I think what Gen AI can do today, we are 3 to 5 years from being able to actually have that in place in the typical enterprise. We are far behind what the tech can do. And as a guy who spent the last maybe 15 years saying, one day AI will be able to, now it can. And it's actually the people and process changes, I think, that are holding it back.
Got it. So when you mentioned, I just want to unpack your first statement, which is that change management will be tougher. What do you mean there?
I think when I think back to the early days on Agile, we actually paid for anyone in the company who wanted to become a Scrum Master to go take the course, because we didn't want them to all be Scrum Masters. But
Scrum Alliance and that kind of thing, yeah.
They came back proponents of Agile, and they were debating what are the right ways to do this and how can we lead. They were excited. Like you could study it for a few minutes, and they were saying, this seems liberating. This is the way I want to work. But with AI, there's a natural hesitancy built into it for many organizations, many consumers, many individuals. So I think it's just as transformative, if not more transformative, but we're starting from a place often of fear. And it takes longer for people to kind of get excited about the concept, see the potential. So I think it's just a different start. It's just a different initial experience for so many people. I think that, if anything, makes it a little tougher than the change that took place with Agile.
You mentioned the fear and the hesitancy. Is it something that people readily admit to, or is it something you feel you have to uncover and prod people into even just admitting there's a problem, which is always the first step?
I think first you can kind of just assume it, and that tends to play out well, that tends to play out true. I think, yes, most people want to pretend they're not afraid. Secretly, they're a little hesitant, and sometimes openly hesitant. I would say most people at Orium are like, maybe they've got some hesitancy, but they're pushing through it, they're pioneering, they're working through it, but like they have that hesitancy. I think we found that just trying to actually be upfront about that, address that head on, that's a normal feeling. We get where it's coming from, because it's changing dynamic for a lot of people when they went into their careers, what they associated as what good looks like and what value looks like. It's changing that. And so until you can reframe a new way of adding value and experience it, then it's you're going to stay in that zone. So I think there's just a bit of a longer shift there. And actually, to be fair, to go back to Agile, it probably felt very similar for managers of Agile teams, right?
It takes years. I always felt it took years. You could build some Agile ceremony around waterfall, which was a lot of people did for a long time.
Yep. And we'd see you say, here's your release plan. It's well, no, where's your Gantt chart? But no. We have these daily routines to adapt and iterate, and it's like, no, where's the 2-year plan? And so there's all these shifts. Like it felt for many companies, feel like, oh, I don't have control. Even though a lot of what Agile's trying to do is drive control by embracing the change that's naturally taking place. To be fair, I say maybe there was some fear at Agile too. I guess it feels a little more distant now, maybe.
Right. No, exactly. And look, there are a lot of theories of innovation, and I won't necessarily say that different companies have different ideas of innovation, but if you look backwards, it seems like there are two generally ways that change happens. One is the theory of creating the future you want to live in, which means like you're moving fast, you're breaking things, you don't know what's going to happen tomorrow, but it can't be like today. And so like, let's invent something we want to see and just go after it. And it may not be right, but let's do it. The second theory is more of a fast follower mentality, which is like, we know that first person is going to spend 10x more money than we are. They're going to screw it up. Why not just sort of draft off of them and take the best ideas? You have, I would say, embraced the first methodology in this sort of transformational time we're in with AI. Can you talk about why that is? What first of all, is that true? And how you think about that?
I think it's different for every company and the position they have in the market. I mean, we are a mid-sized services firm, right? And so, for us, we have to always be very clear on what we stand for. And I think it is easier to do that and be ahead of your customers and your competitors if you're on the forefront of the change. You have to be very specific on the forefront of the change. I've run the business for 15 years now. We've had to adapt it a couple of times. It's interesting. I think we've been waiting for this moment for quite a while. The vision of our company that we set back in 2018 is to be pioneers in adaptive experience. And we said, hey, here's the piece parts that need to come together. We actually filed some patents around that. And just at the time, though, I felt like I was the guy talking about self-driving cars in the 80s. Right. It just a few fundamental advances in technology we knew had to take place, and we weren't going to be the ones to do it, right? But I think for us, it's probably not always been on the bleeding edge, but we've got to be kind of right as it is becoming possible for customers to use this at a price point that makes sense. And then we need to be right at the forefront of that. So for us, it's always been trying to hit that mark. Mm-hmm. I've said to our team a lot, it's been a common point of discussion, for us, and I think for many of the professionals working for us, the safest place to be is on the forefront of this change. And in many cases, we aren't. I think like the train has left the station on us.
Right.
I think we can be kind of very rapid and at showing how this can be instantiated safely and performantly, and bringing that together as the thousands of startups funded around this are doing their job to make this possible. So I think for us, it is safer to be there for a firm in our position in the market. And we add more value to our customers as translators, as one step ahead, but not pie in the sky where it's like our customers don't want us to be out there pontificating about what will happen in 5 years. They want us to be able to show them what they can do next year and this year. That's what they want to talk about.
Got it. And for Orium and you guys to stay ahead of what's going on, sounds like you began pushing a lot harder last year and into the middle of the year. Why that timeline, and what do you feel you gained by that?
We run. We got a lot of people in our business, and you could see very quickly how advances in large language models was going to change how work could get done, and will continue to do so for the next few years. So, our take was at the time, this is a change management tooling it's a transformation problem, not a technology problem anymore, and so we need to move quickly on that. And what we saw at the time was we are ahead of our competitors and we are ahead of our customers, and we intend to stay there. And I do believe that, by next year, we will have firms that are AI native startups with a tool chain built from the ground up for it, with a cost structure that reflects that. And so our perspective is, however, we work with many of the Fortune 100. We've done this for 15 years. We've helped them through stages of transformation. We've transformed ourselves. That has a value too. So, stay on the forefront of that. And that's been our big push. I think there's an element of excitement too. Everybody gets scared of what's getting faster, what's getting automated, but there's new capabilities now for most of the disciplines that we employ, for the value we can add to customers. It's if you know Ethan Mollick, he's one of my favorite kind of newsletters. I saw him speak at an event, and the quote he used, "There is something about your business that basically kind of has been unassailable as a core advantage for you for the last couple decades, that's now immediately gone overnight. At the same time, something your customers have always wanted that's never been possible is possible. And your job as a leader is to figure out each before your competitors do." So we've taken that very seriously, and are pushing kind of on both fronts. How do we get more efficient? How do we deliver value faster? But also, how do we unlock those new capabilities?
Got it. And you mentioned about roles and the capabilities that are available to you. And it's kind of clear that most of the roles don't disappear, but if you're going to build agents, it takes a certain type of mentality to build agents. And what you mentioned about the QA mindset, I would love for you to unpack that for our listeners here, because I think that would be interesting.
What we've seen, and if you talk to those who've been doing this kind of creating it's generally not master agents that do everything. It's specialized components of agents assembled together and kind of building up to what runs a business in many cases. And what we found is that I think people say, "Oh, QA is going to go away." If you asked me in early 2024, we're going to have no QAs; it's all gone. And right now our QAs are maxed. If anything, I'm going to have to hire more. And so, because two parts is we're writing more software. The process of code generation and automation actually puts a bigger burden on testing, even though, while we are, I think it's a continuation of the theme around DevOps for the last 10 years. While it's faster to test, we're writing more software. And I think that's the case here. But when it comes to agents themselves, I really like the phrase, the pilot is easy, production is hard. And so the evaluation, the concept of evaluations and agents really ties to that testing mindset. If you're great at that, if you've been building skills as a QA in automated testing, your ability to adapt, to be able to use kind of an evals-oriented tool chain and to play that role. And we're finding that's not 10% of a team. It's often 40 to 50% of the effort that goes into production agents. And so you've got this whole new opportunity now for an underlying mindset. You have to think about a different way to add value. You're changing the tools, but for that person, there's tons of opportunity now for them if they'll go for it.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's so fascinating because people forget how software development is done and how it's been done for the past 20, 25 years in the Agile era. I mean, you take your first sprint, maybe you can blitz and do a design. Your second sprint, maybe you can, if it's a small enough thing, you can get to your minimum viable, minimum lovable product, depending on your point of view. But then it takes like 4, 5, 6 sprints to harden it and to understand. In the meantime, your CEO is wondering, "Hey, I saw it last week. Why are you telling me it's going to be another 2 months?" Like, well, because there's no retry logic. And by the way, it doesn't handle complex object synchronization to our ERP system. It only handles simple transactions or whatever it is. There are the edge cases often dominate the happy path by an order of magnitude. And so even just getting your head around that to prompt the agent, if you're building it iteratively, like in an agile manner, it kind of feels to me that you still need that mindset.
Absolutely. And being able to assess, how do you get an agent from, say, 60% correct completion? How do you understand, maybe there's some parts of this we're going to split the flow, change what lives where. We've got issues maybe in some of the underlying data. We want to change how we're prompting or working through certain parts of the tasks. We have tool chains we work with now. We can say, hey, we're going to put that in a deterministic, more programmatic flow. We want to leave this non-deterministic and let an LLM maybe handle it. And so I think all of that, but you've got to know how it's doing. And so let's say you on first go in the pilot, you're at 60%. Okay, this is promising. But then as maybe you with some tweaks, you can get to 80%, but getting into that 90% plus, and then being able to have something you'd be comfortable putting out of production. That's where, this mindset matters quite a bit. The notion of evals engineers, eval specialists, you'll see quite a bit of demand for that as this takes off. I really like what you were saying there too around that agile parallel. Think of Agile shifted. I can think of when we started, customers we do 2 releases per year, right?
Right.
We update our website twice per year. It's a 5-week, process by the time it's locked down, tested, and released, and that's what you worked around.
Yeah.
And then as Agile lets you start to try to do tests, weekly, some companies started shipping daily or hourly, and all of a sudden that meant a new tool chain, a new mindset. It meant a different role for tests. All these, that shift in how we worked, which was ultimately trying to get more adapted to just a more uncertain business world and a faster moving business, where all of it trickled down and changed things. I think we're in that era again.
Right. No, I think it makes sense. And if we're in that era, it also strikes me that employees need to adjust how they think about it. And as leaders, we need to understand, how do we judge employees? And so if you look across a several 100-person organization, how do you judge the progress your teams are making broadly? You had talked about a progression. I would love for you to introduce that to the audience and unpack that idea.
Absolutely. And, I'm fortunate. I think most people who've come to work for us have some natural desire to be on the forefront of things.
Right.
But yes, it was a concept actually from Zapier, who on their own, I think, has also done an incredible job of adapting their commercial model to say, here's where we can play now that, in terms of what we can do with agents and what LLMs unlocks for their customers. I love the transformation that they've undergone. But we adapted this model, and I think that the high level rubric was essentially 4 stages. And the notion we found that you never just jump to the 4th spot. You kind of really have to go through it step by step. So let's meet that head on and coach the team through it person by person. And so it was first unacceptable, like just resistant to it, skeptical of it, debated, adopted. Let me go through each one, and then transformative. Now, being a Canadian firm in our headquarters, and we changed unacceptable to needs activation. But yes, needs activation,
right.
Activated.
A friendlier way to say you're not cutting it.
Yeah, exactly. Needs activation. We'll get to there. But I think that's it. Like, at first, that needs activation. Hey, this is all hype. It's risky. I don't even want to touch it. Activated being, hey, they're using it maybe for some baseline tasks. They're maybe doing it for like some Q&A, some searching. They maybe really haven't started rethinking their work, but they're using it as an initial supplement and seeing some time savings. And that, by the way, I think is one of the zones where a company is saying, hey, I've just paid all this money for ChatGPT or Claude or something else, and I'm not seeing any ROI. A lot have stat in that zone, right? There's some incremental gains, but you're not rethinking processes yet. And definitely, you're probably not getting time back yet. Adoptive is actually where we're weaving it into workflows. So we've built a number of workflows in our company now that essentially we've kind of automated an end-to-end chain to save time for our staff or deliver new value for customers. And so kind of having those, we're bringing it into the workflows much more actively. If we have a a contract review, it's done first in a GPT, and then we know what to look at as the output, and then we're reviewing that heuristic, and then we've got a second one to check the first one, and so we're kind of using that as the core part of a task. And then the last part is transformative. We're actually rethinking tasks. Like we've changed completely how we do requirements writing based on what LLMs now allow us to do. The writing part is easy. The matching of requirements to a situation is much easier. And so there's a transformative, but now you're rethinking your processes and the value you can deliver, and often with AI at its core. So those 4 steps we found are really powerful. And yes, we've gone through the exercise of where is everyone and how do we advance? And so now we also start to apply this to some of our customers too, if we're working in hybrid with their teams. We try to encourage this rubric as well as a way to make sure that in 3 and 6 months, their teams are driving more value out of some of this new tooling.
Yeah. And I think this idea of an employee progression model needs to be more widely talked about in this AI revolution, because there's so much focus on the tech and not enough focus on adopting the tech, because somebody either needs to force the organization to work in a certain way, or the employees need to be encouraged from a career progression point of view to improve and experiment and learn.
Absolutely. And I think we've tried to take a really positive approach around it. I think we've tried to use illustrative examples of kind of those who are maybe further down the path. And I would say too, that's been one of our learnings too, is I can try to create a scaffold for this, and my hope, and that this isn't going to be easy, but no matter what, you'll be at the forefront of what's going on in your career, not just us as a company. But I think ultimately, people, I think the bigger thing that's moved people along the progression has been hearing from and working with peers who are further in the journey. And they like that more than me as a CEO pontificating, saying, it's going to be great. It's going to be wonderful, everybody. They know that part of this is going to be hard. We've tried to be upfront about that, and it is a change. And,
Got
it. But I think it allows us to say, hey, like, here's who's further along. Here's what that means on the rubric. And then they're talking about their experience and what life is like there. And I think it motivates people. So we found that peer-to-peer has been probably more impactful than anything top-down.
Yeah, so if we're going to stay in the progression point of view, I understand you have different ways to bring people along the journey, to hear from peers. From the needs activation to the activated state, where they're going from resistant to tinkering and prototyping maybe, how do you get the person to that step? Like,
I think what is helping, part of it was just permission. So we in the first half of last year, made sure that we had kind of enterprise appropriate accounts and policies, and had set our team up to say, look, like, and because the reality is many of them are going to do it on their own time anyways, and or have some shadow IT approach to it. So our view was that we're going to embrace this early on, both to corral that activity, but to make sure that we keep our customers' information safe. So we set very clear, here's where you can do it. Also, it's very bad if you're doing it in non-approved systems, because there's some real challenges here. But we set up a safe, appropriate place for our team to run with it, and educated them. I think that many of them, honestly, they start kind of working around the edges on it a little bit. They find some tasks. We would do a lot of information sharing. But I think what's really helped, to be honest, is people starting to use this personally, right? They're using it. I think, I remember a very, very, thoughtful letter that was written and published in one of our Slack channels. And I said, hey, this must have taken you 15, 20 minutes to write. Like, thank you for taking the time to do that. I said, no, it took me 2 minutes in ChatGPT. I use it to write love letters to my wife too. They find these personal use cases, maybe not that one, but they find these personal use cases, but then they start, I think it builds a familiarity. They start to see it as a tool.
Yeah.
And it starts to get them out of that hesitancy zone. So giving a safe, appropriate place to do it. And we don't mind also if, and we talk about just those use cases, but I think that personal use certainly helps.
Got it.
Yeah.
And then in terms of sharing with peers, what are some of the checkpoints that you have set up throughout the week, throughout the month to help people learn from each other?
We do an office hours component every week. We do kind of monthly kind of demo and sharing sessions. We do a monthly all hands. Usually we're highlighting something there as well. We have the team come and present to our executive on some of what they're doing with this tooling, what it's enabling. So trying to make sure that, we all have that familiarity at every at every role in the company. And then we some of it's asynchronous, like in Slack. I was reading it this morning, like some of the updates coming in from our team on just new ways that they're kind of, finding ways to deliver value, finding ways to get faster. So all those channels, and I think those are all just good components of change management, period. But we've deployed AI and agent specific channels in that regard. I think that the other front for our operations and SG&A, two parts. For delivery, we very early started doing some adoption of kind of a production or kind of core process oriented agent framework built around N8N and we use a bit of N8N and LangChain to rethink some of the core parts of the work, and the team really leaned into that early, both building it but also adopting it, and you can make so much progress with very lean team effort at this point in time. Like I've been amazed what they've done with that. And then in SG&A as well, in operations, really kind of enabled, onboarded, but also made it very clear, like at the end, we've got this window to stay ahead. We've got a window before we have new competitors. And so we've kept a specific pace on it, but also I think really tried to celebrate as the teams made progress in rethinking our core internal processes as well.
No, it makes sense. I mean, I think having that kind of forward-thinking mindset really helped push your team forward, but it's obviously not all roses. Do you have any examples of things that you tried, you're like, hey, this is really going to increase adoption, and it just sort of fell flat that other people can maybe learn from?
I'll try to think of a specific example. I would say the theme that comes to mind is when you take a process and just copy paste it over with an AI bit in the middle. Especially if you do it just within the domain of one department, a lot of things are best solved across customer touch points and internal departments. And in many cases, starting with what context do we have and what is the outcome we want, and kind of rethinking the process in between around that. Because if we just copy paste over, like, I would say if I think internally, how we're doing a number of our processes, it's been a chance for us to rethink, hey, like let's automate or move this into tooling. Then let's add kind of the agentic component around these bits. So we've changed where things live, try to rethink the process overall. That would be, I think, kind of the most common learning we've seen when things kind of didn't quite go as planned. It's that need to rethink. Maybe a good example actually would be for requirements. So we talked about requirements.
Yeah.
And so early on, it was, okay, well, let's refine all the code, call notes, and kind of write those requirements faster. And there's something about that, I suppose. But, the biggest problem, I believe, in our space when you're working with you're essentially starting with a blank page. And then the dynamic between a consultancy and the customer is, well, let's try to get everything on the page. But if we've missed anything, then that's where friction arises, right? And I've seen far fewer times that people talk about customers changing their mind. Like customers change their mind, but usually we can accommodate that. Missed requirements, missed context, the things that lived in your system from 10 years ago that you don't have people who know that anymore. Those are the ones that cause much more substantial challenges. And so we've now, so the way we thought that process at first didn't solve that problem. So we got a little faster at doing something, but you weren't necessarily seeing what you want from it. So we've now gone out and we actually start doing our requirements from a universe of requirements. We know all the requirements that we've done so many of these commissions. We know what the scope of what's out there. So we now start from a universe of, and try to have much more concrete discussions on what's in and what's out. Because being able to discuss what's not being included, not just, hey, do we have all that's in, makes a difference in being able to have a common shared understanding and accordingly, the right timelines, the right budget, all of those, fewer surprises. So when we could rethink it based on what LLMs enabled, then we could, I think, deliver more value all across the board. Because if we don't get things done on time, it hurts our margin. The customer's unhappy. It hurts them. Like, getting this right is good for everybody. So I think that's one example where that rethink, really did help deliver kind of more value.
I mean, this really resonates with me because I think we've all been through these projects where you have a system that's been working for a decade and some well-meaning engineer decides it's not on the latest framework or whatever. They decide to blow it up and rebuild it. But what you have in the, that was built in years 3 through 10 is really like decades of bug fixes and hard-won knowledge that you also blew up in the process. So proceeding cautiously, and I think missing requirements often just comes from that because those fixes aren't written down. They're just, the person leaves and they're gone. I want to talk about a little bit of a controversial topic, especially as a service provider, which is AI bans. I mean, there are just a lot of enterprises that are just like, have kicked the can 12, 24 months down the road. We know we can't allow it now, and we're not going to revisit allowing it because we heard a story. Or if you're a forward-thinking service provider who's now becoming AI native, what do you do in this situation? How are you thinking about this problem?
I would say, fortunately, even in the last 2-3 months, I've seen more of those firms that had that policy keep actively revisiting the policy in year. But certainly it exists out there, and certainly, like, most organizations don't know how to procure this. They don't know, how they'll safely instantiate and govern this. Let alone making sense of how is this going to change the roles in their organization? How is this going to change their spot, their space in the market? I get where it comes from. I do. There is an element of what's that fast follow component, right? And not every organization needs to be on the forefront of this. That's okay, because there are more and more as the vendors out there continue to refine their offerings, there will be ways to catch up.
I want to geek out with you for a moment because I feel like in the land of open source, we actually saw this in about a 3 to 4 year period in legal departments where it was so onerous to procure anything with like copyleft or like a GNU license or like any of these things. But it almost like 5 years later, a switch shifted that we stopped asking about it. No one cares what the language is anymore. No one cares what the license is anymore. Is that a good analogy for this or not?
I think that's a great analogy. And because I remember when there were service agreements that we would receive.
Hard.
It was next to like, we will not have malicious software or open source, right? It was basically considered, the worst category of concepts was open source. And now you can't get anything without some form of open source in it. I think it's a great parallel, and management's perception of it, just awareness and perception of it, which I think at least is a bit more here. They're paying a bit more attention to it, but legal, IT, all of these groups have to form an opinion, and they've got to kind of make sense of how to work that into the organization. It is partly where, so I did a talk at Grocery Shop a week back, and we asked the audience in a poll, where do you think this should live in an organization? And the most common answer of the cohort in the room was in a cross-functional department with elevated autonomy to execute. And I can see where that would come from because I've seen for some organizations, they're able to move fast on this. For others, I've seen where they're getting bogged down with kind of 6, 7 groups trying to come together and form their opinion. And I do worry that those companies are going to probably still be in the same spot 1 year from now. And then I do start to worry that they will start to lose ground on their competitors. So I can see we're bringing that together for at least a period of time with a department with a mandate and authority to execute on it. I can see where that would make a difference for some firms.
The AI discussion, I think, has been super insightful today because I think you've given us so many different things from your progression to the analogy to Agile to navigating AI bands. I would love to do a little celebration. And as a somewhat interested bystander in the Mach Alliance, I'm a member of the Industry Specialist Advisory Board, and seeing you coming in, I mean, Mach has been through a journey from its founding until now. I mean, obviously, I think every category of e-commerce went through a hype cycle during the pandemic. I mean, there's just no way around it. Every company out there. And I think the idea of Mach and headless was the same way. And so that, there are a number of adoptions in companies that maybe it wasn't a fit or it doesn't make sense. Now we have this new AI transformation coming in. You're coming in as a new leader. Why did you want to be the president of Mach Alliance? Let's just start there. And what does it mean now? Does the A mean AI now instead of API? Like, what are we talking about?
I hear that. I'm not yet playing the game. I think the line from one of our ambassadors put it very, very well. Look, Mach is what ready looks like for the agentic era. And so our customers who are further down the path with kind of composable foundations, and they've not only brought in some of that stack, but also the people and process change. There's some people and process changes that come with it. Generally, I'm not afraid of their ability to adapt to what's next. They've made generally improvements in their data. They've got performance systems that these agents can work against. I think they're able to now curate their stack. They're not going to have to go through a 2-3 year lift and shift to be able to start to do that. So I think that notion that is the foundation, and I believe many of the members of the Alliance today were either born for this moment, and just maybe the tech didn't exist quite yet, or they're very ambitiously pushing on roadmaps. You look at the announcement last week, Stripe and OpenAI around ACP, right? Stripe is a member of the Alliance and a very active one. Mm-hmm. And so I think I'm excited for where the members are pioneering. I'm excited by some of the kind of incoming potential members and some of the ecosystem that we're going to spend a lot of time as a board reaching out to some of the AI native and agentic ecosystems as well. We see, I like to say, the notion of the Mach Alliance was at the time when it was founded that this whole one system to rule them all thing isn't the reality anymore. And if anything, those firms actively try to make it difficult for firms to go outside of it, and that there must be a better way. I think they got 100+ firms to work proactively in advance to be able to pre-integrate, to make it faster, cheaper, safer to go down that path, and to pressure the rest of the market at least to open up those capabilities sooner than they otherwise would have, if at all. And I think that pattern's repeating itself. So if we can make sure that Mach stands for that foundation for readiness for what's next, what we see is there is another challenge ahead. Because if all of our members who are collectively building hundreds of agents, and that's probably going to amplify, plus everything that's out on the market, we're going to sit here in 2 years from now and say it's too complex, it's too time consuming, it's too expensive. And at the same time, there are firms now back on the market saying, we've got one, you'll sign one contract for the one agent that will run your whole business. And we do enough of this, or I don't believe that to be true.
Right.
And it won't be one agent that runs your whole business. It will be many. running many parts of your business. And so I think we think there's a very exciting challenge ahead for the Alliance, recognizing that if we can make sure that our members work together proactively, we think we can be one of the first actual kind of agentic ecosystems that works much more proactively on behalf of our customers, far beyond them when the market demands it. And I think we're a little bit out ahead on things right here.
Yeah.
I think we're back in those first days of the Alliance where people say, why do I care about that? And in a year or two, that changed. But definitely, I think we've certainly, we're trying to set a bold statement for where we want to go with this, and starting to bring our members together to make that possible in the next 12 to 24 months.
Yeah. Do you see that membership criteria and things will have to be revisited? Because I think there was a very, I would say, headless API oriented view of the world, kind of backward looking, forward looking. You had to be a certain size vendor and some percentage of your. Is everything on the table, or is nothing on the table? Not to put you on the spot, Jason.
Yeah, I think I do try to ground on the notion of there are firms that think of Mach, like brands that think of Mach as a requirement of their RFPs. They place trust in the mark that we put forward. And so I keep that in mind. And a lot of things are shifting. So I would say I take a more pragmatic approach to what do we need to do to achieve the goal. And I think, we'll think about our member category and our criteria appropriately to that. So I think the answer would be yes. I would expect to see some changes in our tiers, in our criteria. We're gonna be thoughtful about it.
Yeah.
But I can't see a scenario in which we achieve the vision that we've set out, and make sure the organization is doing what it needs to for its members and for brands, and we don't make some changes, even probably meaningful changes along the way.
Makes sense. No, I mean, that's exciting. I appreciate you humoring me and coming on and talking about this transition that we're all in. It happens to be that I'm probably the first person to be able to interview you after coming in as president. So, I feel like I would have missed an opportunity to not talk about it at all.
I love it. It's perfect. And, this is, I think this is, again, for many, this is where everyone has to go. Orion, every member of the Alliance today, all of their end customers, this is a journey we're all going to have to go on the next few years. So to be at the forefront of that, I think is a really, really meaningful thing.
Yeah, no, it makes sense. Look, it's exciting, and I really appreciate you being able to spend time with us today. If you are in the audience and you are transforming your organization and you're a leader and you would love to come on and tell your story about good, bad, what's happening, shoot me a message, LinkedIn, email. Happy to hear your story told. And thanks again, Jason, for coming on.
Thanks so much, Rick. Thanks for having me. Thank you, everybody.